Hello, everyone, and welcome to I Was There, conversations with eyewitnesses to history. I'm Ron Roberson.
And I'm Jeff Trujillo.
Yes, you are, sir, and I'm so happy, man, to be with you. Man, we've been planning this a long time. You remember?
We've been talking about it for quite some time, yeah, going back several months. And we've been talking about working together. Well, we have been working together for years, but talking about doing something that was fun for us to do together, just kind of a pet project for quite some time, yeah.
Right. And I tell you, man, I'm excited about doing it again and excited about working with you. We've worked together for so many years. And how exactly did we meet?
Oh, man. Well, we were both very young,
yeah.
starting our careers. And yeah, we
30 years ago.
I calculated it was 32 years.
Wow.
32 years ago, yeah,
wow.
that we met. Yeah, I don't know, man.
Where were we? It was a workshop. There was a workshop going on at Continental Cablevision. Remember that?
That's right.
One of many names.
Yes. I used to run those workshops. And
yes.
So and you walked in.
Yep.
And the light went on and the angels sang. And
Dude, when I walked in there, man, I knew I was at the right place at the right time doing the right thing. I knew that.
Well, and you, right away, I knew you were somebody who was excited about what we were doing and excited to hear more about what we were doing. A lot of people back then, we would get folks, these workshops were to teach people how to create programs that they could put on television. And most people just came in and wanted to be famous.
Public access, yeah.
That was their number one thing. I want to be famous. But you were interested in the process.
Right.
And how do we make these programs? And
right.
You wanted to know everything from the ground up. How do you make this happen? And so, I mean, right away, I was young. I had limited knowledge myself, but
right.
Together, I think we put our heads together and learned along the way, and here we are 32 years later.
Dude, you trained me, man. You showed me the ropes. You were the one of few people that even talked to me back in those days.
I felt sorry for you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. But you trained me and got me to the point to where I went all the way to CNN Headline News, the local edition. Remember that?
You took the few little nuggets that I provided just from what I knew, and you took it and ran with it and went way farther than anyone else that I had known in that career. And you ended up on Headline News and and the list of people you've interviewed over the years, it's
oh my goodness,
people that know you and follow your social media see,
right.
I love how you post pictures of different interviews you're conducting at the time. Dude, it's a who's who.
Exactly.
It's incredible the amount of people that you've...
And I've had some eyewitnesses, too, to a history.
That's right.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
That's right.
But what was the purpose? Now, we had talked about doing a show, and we didn't quite know what we were going to do. Mm-hmm. What drove you to this way? You made the decision, let's do this.
Well, in our careers, we've been fortunate enough to meet some really interesting people.
Right.
We just mentioned you've met a lot of celebrities in previous jobs that I've had. I've had the opportunity to be around celebrities, and those are great. And a lot of that is history unfolding before our eyes. But to me, some of the most intriguing stories that I've heard are from everyday people that we've had an opportunity to do an interview on. We were doing a story a few years ago on Veterans Day.
Yes.
And we happened to do an interview with an elderly gentleman who was in Patton's Army.
Yes.
That interview was incredible. The stories, he met Patton. Mm-hmm. He fought in Patton's army. Patton came through, spoke to the troops. He told us some pretty harrowing stories about what happened when he was there. And I walked away from that interview just going, man. And there's been so many of those instances that people tell their stories and you're like, I wish I could share this with the world. I wish. And I tell my friends, they're like, oh, I would have loved to have heard that. And so being a fan of history, I'm not a historian, but I am a fan of history.
Yes.
And then me and you talk.
Right.
And when we get going, it's pretty funny. The little nuggets of history that you'll throw out some like, you're kidding.
Right.
And then we'll talk about it. And what happened? What was that like? And so when we talked about doing something fun together, it just kind of seemed natural that this is something we could do. I have friends that have seen some amazing things in history. Mm-hmm. You have friends. And I think the hope is that by getting a start with our friends and sharing some of these stories, it'll blossom.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll be able to bring in more folks. And
absolutely.
Word will pass on and we'll be able to share moments in history that we get to hear with everyone.
Absolutely. And that's what we want our listening audience to understand. This is your opportunity to talk about an event or events that you've experienced and been holding all that on the inside. Here's a place for you to let it all out and tell us where you were. Doesn't have to be political. Doesn't have to be sports related. It could be anything.
It could be any, and it doesn't even have to be super significant.
Right.
It can be just a small moment in time that maybe they didn't know it was history. Well, usually you don't know it's history being made at the time, but something that may have seemed insignificant at the time, but later on you look back and go, wow, I met that person, or I was there, I saw that happen.
Right.
And so that's my goal, is also just to have fun with you. And,
Right.
That's
the main thing.
Exactly.
That's the main thing. You and I used to have some real super deep conversations.
Yep.
I recall one time getting up and walking out on you.
One time?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying
probably more than that.
But even though a lot of times we disagree, we were never really disagreeable. Well, was that one time? We didn't speak for a day.
I think maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and we're working in the same office, folks. I'm about 6 feet from
Well,
you.
that's the thing. We've worked in such close quarters for so long. I mean, if we can make it this long for 32 years, I think we're doing okay.
I think so. I think you kind of stuck with me, bro. But yeah, no, I'm excited about doing this broadcast. I love the format. And what we're doing, and we know some stuff. We've been pretty fortunate in our careers to be able to be in some pretty amazing situations. Yes.
And I've been able to, I'm usually a behind the camera guy.
Mm-hmm.
You were more of, well, you did both. You were behind and in front, but I've been fortunate enough to be behind the camera when you're interviewing some pretty famous people.
Yes.
And it's always fun. And so hopefully we can inform and entertain people along the way as we do this.
Now, when you're dealing with people, are we talking people that are famous or infamous?
Could be both.
Okay, so
It could be either.
You met a guy named Wolf. You bought
Oh yeah, I did.
Remember, you bought a CD and the guy called you back and was all excited because nobody else had bought one.
Yeah, and then and we did a show on him, and that was history.
Public access television was amazing.
Public access in the day was it's so hard to describe because people used to say, you get paid to do this? and like I said, most people that walk through our doors, they wanted to be famous,
right,
or they already thought they were famous and wanted to share their talent with everyone. And so along the way, we saw the good, bad, and the ugly, I think,
a whole lot of the
business.
Whole lot of ugly.
But it makes for great stories. And so maybe we could share some of those here as well as we go through these. But
brother, I got a million of them.
So, Ron, just through the years, we've talked about different things that we've done and seen. And so I'm curious, as you look back on your life, well, I know that you've seen times in history.
Oh, big time!
That
that
you could share with us. And so, when you look back, what are some of the most historically significant things that you've seen and you've been able to witness?
Well, on a scale outside of the infamous, the famous, I think probably the highlight of even my career was when I hooked up with Smokey Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
Remember when I was doing his commercials and stuff? I even brought him down to the studio and all that kind of stuff, and we took pictures. But the historical moment was he had a golf tournament in Florida, and they invited me down to do all the videos and all that kind of stuff. Man, I was like crazy. Man, I had a VIP pass, walking next to Smokey. You couldn't tell me anything, man. I had arrived. And so my job was to get all the behind-the-scenes shots and get photos. I was doing video and photos, for Smokey. And I'm looking at this dude, and I'm going like, wow, man, this guy is a legend. And I'm still here with him. But I don't know, man, what I did that year where the good Lord blessed me so much. But I ended up, now remember, there were celebrities at his golf tournament. He had a golf tournament to raise money for his foundation, Smokey Robinson Foundation. And so I'm on the golf course with Bo Jackson, Lawrence McCutcheon, all these different athletes. What's the crazy guy from the Giants?
Lawrence Taylor.
Lawrence Taylor. That guy's kind of creepy, man. I hope he's not listening.
Yeah, you better hope he's not listening.
Well, he's old
I didn't say
now.
anything.
Yeah, he's old now. I just hit him at the knees. We're good. But that you would think would have been good enough. Uh-huh. But on the way back, Smokey decided to take a limo back instead of the bus that we were on, and his manager, Earl Bryant, wanted me to ride with them in the limo.
Oh, my gosh.
And in the limo was Smokey Robinson. Are you ready for this? Berry Gordy.
Oh, holy moly.
Berry Gordy the Third. I'm getting chill bumps right now, man. I'm not going to lose it right here, right now. Berry Gordy the Third. And another guy by the name of Don Barden. Now, he may not ring a bell with you because he's a really quiet guy.
Not familiar.
But he was the first African-American to own a casino back east, like Atlantic City somewhere. He was the one that owned the Fitzgerald.
Oh, okay.
That he owned all of those. So he was there with Smokey and stuff, and they're paying each other off on golf bets, And I'm sitting in there and I'm just looking at these guys, man, and I'm like, I'm like petrified, oh my God, should I even be here? I'm not worthy, But that had to be one of my all-time favorites.
How did you not come out of that limo ride without a record contract?
Man, I tell you, I was just blown away.
Yeah.
I could not believe that. And you've known me for years.
Oh, yeah.
I don't get starstruck.
No, not
I've seen enough of them. They don't. Matter of fact, I don't like stars. But man, I'm telling you, man, I came really, really close to pooping my pants, man.
Oh, I bet.
Smokey Robinson. Don Barton, Berry Gordy.
Man. That's a heck of a ride.
You better believe it, man. You want another one? Or did you
yeah. Let's hear it.
The next one, remember the show we did? We used to do a program called The Pulse Media.
Oh, yeah.
And I brought in a guest, and I didn't really realize who the guy was. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but he was kin to my ex-wife. They were kin. And his name is Billy Houston. I'm saying the name wrong, but that's his other name, but he has a stage name. I'm just going to leave it at that. But he was married to Etta James.
Oh, wow.
And he was part of a group called the Moonglows.
Okay.
The Moonglows. And they had a hit record, talking about the 10 Commandments of Love or something like that, or what have you. But I didn't realize it was standing in front of me was this iconic figure who was married to Etta James and even had a son by Etta James.
Wow.
And we had the pictures and everything to prove it, so that kind of blew me away.
And you were kin through marriage.
Well,
at the time.
We really don't want to go into that, right? That's another show, I was there, yeah.
But still, there's a brush with fame that,
yes, Yes.
That's pretty incredible.
I met Ronald Reagan one time.
I remember you telling me that a long time ago. So this is a story that you got to tell.
That was one of the few times you were actually listening to me.
Well, Ronald Reagan, huge fan,
I know.
One of my heroes.
I know, folks. Here we go. But I was a foster child. Right. I was raised in foster homes, and they had this big thing at the Hollywood Bowl where all the foster kids came. They put on a big show for them and all that kind of stuff. They had clowns and all that kind of stuff. And somehow or another, I ended up around the corner and kind of semi-backstage. And standing back there was Ronald Reagan getting ready to go on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, man. So I didn't know any difference. I said, hi, my name is Ronald, too. And he says, well, that's just great, kid. And so... and he said something. I don't remember the exact conversation we had, but he spoke to me for a little bit. Uh-huh. And I think he was just asking me, how I was doing and that kind of general talk. And he says, well, I've got to go now. And I'm just sitting there, and I didn't know how big he was. I was a teenager, man. Well, I wasn't even a teenager. I was like around 10, 11, so I didn't know who he was. And this is kind of like what we're talking about with some of the stories we want from people. You may have met somebody who wasn't quite as famous then.
That's right.
But he later on became president, and I remember that.
And then you look back and go, wait, that was that guy.
I met him.
That's right. I was there.
Yep. I was there. I was there. And then we're going to make this another story as we continue on this podcast, and we're going to bring it up later on, and you know which one it is. We're going to make that a story by ourselves, a standby story.
I have a feeling I know where we're going.
That was the day when we met Lou Ferrigno.
That was the infamous Lou Ferrigno day, and I don't think we'll have enough time on this podcast. No. But that is one of the greatest stories that, and one of the greatest things I've ever seen, and we will get into that with detail.
Yes,
not on this first episode, but. We'll get there eventually.
We got to tell that story.
Yeah.
We got to tell that story. Yeah. Dude, now, enough about me. You were in a hot spot, man, for entertainment, and almost anybody that was somebody passed right by. History was passing by you on a daily basis.
So you're referring to, I've told you stories about it during my college years. I had the great fortune to work at a recording studio. I was a security guard. And
did you wear a uniform, Jim?
You had to wear a shirt, slacks, and tie. I did that for 4 years. At the end of that 4 years, I was like, I got to get a job where I don't have to wear a tie anymore.
Did they give you? Did you have a gun with one bullet?
You know, we did have a gun, and I was not into guns at the time. So we were supposed to carry the gun, and I always refused to carry the gun. I just kept it in the drawer,
right?
And I never had to use it. Never pulled it out.
One bullet,
half a bullet. And one bullet, and it was a blank. But I worked at a recording studio. I was a security guard for a recording studio called Lion's Share Recording Studios that was owned by Kenny Rogers.
Yeah.
And later on by an associate of Kenny Rogers, who was a great boss that I had. And, and during that time, it was one of the premier recording studios in Los Angeles in the mid-'80s. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I mean, it was just a parade of celebrities coming through there. And we were the initial greeters. And so when they'd come through the door, it was our job to greet them, mm-hmm. Make them feel comfortable, take them to... There was 3 studios, and we would find out which studio they were, going to be working in,
right.
Escort them to the studios. And, I was an observer basically in that role, but it put me kind of front seat to, seeing all these famous people coming through the door, and got a glimpse at how records were made and how the recordings were made and everything. And it was such a... And at the time, I don't know that I appreciated it, but it's one of those deals. You look back and you go, "Holy moly!" They did some of the recording, the re-recording, and the mixing for "We Are the World" there, and the overdubbing. And on a daily basis, I'd go to college. I was going to college. I'd go in the morning. I worked the swing shift, 2 to 10, and most of the recording takes place at night.
Right.
And so during the day, the offices were open. At night, they'd do the recording, and so. You'd get to work. I'd look at the sheet. Okay, here's who's coming in today. And I mean, on a regular basis, it's like, holy smokes!
Give us some names, man. Come on, bro.
Everybody from, oh my gosh, well, "We Are the World." Everybody who sang on that song came through there.
Michael,
you've got Stevie Wonder. You've got Michael Jackson. You've got and Jermaine Jackson. We had. Oh my gosh! There's
Cyndi Lauper.
I think Cyndi Lauper came through.
She's in there. Yeah,
she came through.
She was in "We Are the World," I believe. Yeah.
What the producer? What's his name?
Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones. Yeah. One of my favorite guys was Quincy Jones, and I'll just tell a quick story.
Oh, is this the one about your wife?
Yeah. So who I was dating at the time, and she was coming to visit me, and I was doing my rounds, and I knew she was due. There was no cell phones back then, and so I knew she was due to be there. And I come down from my rounds. It's nighttime. The parking lot's dark. Our entrance faced the parking lot. And as I look out and I see her car and I see the hood is up and it's overheating and it just steam. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's her car. And so I start walking out there and I see that as I get closer, I see there's a man there. And we had a hose out back and he has a hose and he's spraying down her radiator. And as I'm getting closer, I'm like, holy mackerel, that's Quincy Jones. And she's standing there talking to him. And I just came up and I'm like, I got it, sir, and he was the nicest guy. And he was just, I'm okay. And just helped us out and helped her out. And it was just, I was like, oh my gosh. And I said to her, I'm like, do you know who that is? She's like, no. I was like, Quincy Jones. Oh no, she didn't know. She didn't realize who Quincy Jones was.
Right.
But on a regular basis, Jose Feliciano was just
Tell the truth.
No, just a crazy dude. Just in a fun way. Okay. One day, he and his entourage come down. It was him, his wife, and his manager. And they come down and, my job was to guard the parking lot and guard the facility. And they come down and he's got a baseball bat and, they're leaning him down. And his wife has a mitt and his manager has a baseball. And they're walking out to the parking lot. I go, what are you guys doing? And they go, we're going to play some baseball. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, you guys can't do that. We had super luxurious cars out. I'm like, you guys can't do that. And they're like, oh no. And they're setting up. His wife gets behind him, his manager gets in front. He's got the bat. And they sat there and played baseball for 10 minutes while I was just sweating bullets. And his manager finally said, he never hits the ball. Don't worry about it. But I'm like, guys, please don't put any dents in these cars, But just the nicest guy, just really
Jose
fun.
Feliciano.
Oh my gosh! And
Come on,
so
baby,
I mean,
light
there was a million of them. I mean, Barbara Streisand was in there.
How was she? Was she nice to you?
She was always very businesslike to us, but when she left, she went through and she gave, I mean, we were peons, as security guys. She gave every single person in our studio a bottle of wine, a really nice bottle of wine, and said, with a little card that said, "Thank you for helping watch the place while I was here." I mean,
dude, did you
really
save that?
For a long time I did.
Come on, man.
I know.
That'd be worth something about now.
You know what? I think I didn't store it right because I didn't know anything about wine at the time, but we tried to drink it, years later, and I think it had gone bad. That was my fault, not her fault. But I mean, but being able to just see some of these folks, it was a pretty amazing experience.
How was Kenny Rogers?
The nicest man, super nice. I mean, it was a real blessing to have that job. And luckily I was really fortunate to, a lot of the friends I grew up with also worked at this place. And so it was such a great opportunity in that I worked with my friends. We were all seeing these amazing things, we would all share stories with each other. And our boss was great. Kenny was great. I mean, it was just, I used to have to pick up our paychecks at his house.
At his house?
At his house in Beverly Hills.
How was he living, man? Was it nice? Plush?
Yeah. I mean, nicest house I'd ever seen up to that time. It was up in the Hollywood Hills, and it was a pretty special time.
Did you realize the enormity of the people that you were meeting and the status of the folks? Did it register with you at that age?
Not really. I mean, I think the one that really blew me away was I was a big Beatles fan, and George Martin came in.
Oh wow!
One time, and
you knew who he was?
Yeah.
Oh wow!
Because I was a big Beatles fan, and when he came in, I was like, wow, that's George Martin. And so there were times that were like that. David Lee Roth came in, and he was a lot of fun. And one day he came down and he goes, I'm going to McDonald's. I'm buying cheeseburgers for everybody. Who wants a cheeseburger? You guys want cheeseburgers? And we're like, yeah, okay. And he pulls away in his Mercedes, comes back with a huge bag of cheeseburgers, and starts throwing cheeseburgers at everybody. And so he bought us all lunch. And so
did you save that cheeseburger?
I didn't save the cheeseburger. I should have.
It'd probably still be good to this very day.
But yeah, just fortunate to be able to see some of those things.
And you there 4 years?
I was there about 4 years. Yeah, got me through college. The greatest job for college that I could have ever imagined.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Oh, and so you just worked there throughout your college, and then you just left.
And then I started working in cable, which is where we met.
Right.
To go full circle. And then I met somebody really famous when you walked through the door. So.
Oh, dude. There you go. Dude, come on, man. You didn't have to go there. You already got the job. Hey, before we go, we've got about what do we got, about another 5 minutes or so?
Yeah.
Do you want to get into one of the big events that happened in my life? Or,
yeah, I do.
I think we can do it in 5 minutes.
Well, because we've talked about it a little bit.
Right.
And I think we realized that we were actually in different points of our lives, but we were in the same place roughly at the same time.
Viewing the same thing.
Viewing the same thing.
From different perspectives.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of deep, man. So we're talking about the 1965 riots.
Yep.
And do I dare say that I got an Emmy nomination for the Watts Towers, and we dealt with the Watts riots?
Years later, you produced a story.
Right.
On, what's his name? Simon Rodea?
Simon Rodea.
Yeah. And on the Watts Towers.
Yeah.
And so you went down there and did a whole story, and were lucky enough to be nominated for an Emmy.
Yeah. Now, I don't know, how it all started and that kind of stuff. There's different variations of it, but all I know that it kicked off, and when it kicked off, I was on 130th and Willowbrook in Compton at the time. And I was able to go up on the railroad tracks where the old red car would come down, and I could look down towards Watts, which was only just a couple of miles away, and I could see the place in flames.
Yeah.
And I knew something was going on, and I knew something was crazy. And then you look at television, and television then was a little different than it is now. But nevertheless, you were able to see some of the turmoil and things that were going on. It was a very scary time. Now, what were you seeing at the influx?
Well, so mine is very hazy because it's one of my first memories.
Right.
I mean, I was 2, so I don't remember a lot. I've heard a lot through what my parents told me they experienced during that time.
Right.
But evidently the story that my parents said was I was playing in the yard. My parents grew up on Missouri Avenue and Alameda. And so Watts was, I looked on a map recently when we were talking about this, just to see where the riots broke out,
right,
we were within a quarter mile of where it broke out. I
right.
didn't realize we were that close. And my parents had saved their money, and they were built a house right on the corner there of Missouri and Alameda. And they were a young couple. I had come along. I was playing in the yard, I guess, and my mom said a police officer pulled up and said, "Ma'am, please take your son in the house. It's not safe out here right now, and it's not going to be safe." Now, I don't remember that. What I remember is I remember my father. I remember there was a lot of commotion, but I remember my father and both of my grandfathers, who also lived on that same street, and my cousin coming into the house with rifles.
Wow.
To guard, because
right.
the fear was that the riots were going to spill over the railroad tracks, which line Alameda there,
right,
and come towards our property. And they were burning everything.
Yes.
And so the threat was that they were going to start burning houses. And so they came in the house. I remember, I can clearly remember seeing that and thinking, those are guns, which I'd seen on TV, but I'd never seen in person. Really, yeah. And then I remember my mom took us, and I remember my mom was crying, and we went to stay at my mom and my grandmother went to stay at my aunt's in Bellflower. And so we stayed there for the duration of the riots, which I think was 6 days or 8 days or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
I read a little bit about the riots, just kind of brushing up on it.
Right.
And holy moly, what a time.
Scary time, especially for a kid. I was a sophomore in high school at Centennial. And I remember the burnings. And then, of course, I got all excited. And we were a gang of kids together. And somebody broke into Hudson's shoe store on the corner of El Segundo and Willowbrook. And I went in there, too, and while everybody's grabbing stuff and running out, I was in there trying on shoes. I want to make sure mine fit. But all that stuff, man, we went into some of the local pharmacy, and I grabbed a bunch of junk. I was grabbing stuff that I didn't even need, and went to take the stuff home. And my foster parents at the time said, "You're not bringing that stuff in here. Get that stuff out of here." So I never got anything. We were drinking. It was hot. It was the hot. I had never felt that kind of heat before.
Really?
It was really hot. 65.
Hot from the weather? Because it was August. It was August, right?
Yes.
And it was hot from the weather. And the fire, I would imagine, too. And I read that there was something like 800 buildings burned.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 800 buildings were burned. In fact, I looked at some of the stats. There was 34 people killed. I think there was 2 policemen and 1 fireman included in the 34. There was 1,000 people injured. There was 4,000 arrests.
Wow.
And in the end, there was $40 million in property damage that was done during that riot.
Wow. And some of that stuff is never recovered. You can go up on Vermont or some of the other areas where there were riots, and that stuff was never rebuilt.
Right.
But
I can tell you, my family, it affected my parents, I think, their entire lives. Because they had saved their entire life's savings and put it into that house. That house, there was an incident following the riots where my father was assaulted by a group of people who were breaking car windshields, and they were breaking our windshield. My dad was a former Marine and came out and confronted them, not thinking, and they threw him against the car, and they were hitting him, and he got out of it okay. My mom was hysterical, and at that point they said, "That's it, we're out of here, and we're moving." And they moved. They kept the house for a few years. They turned it into a rental. But one of my memories as a kid was every time they couldn't keep a steady tenant in that house because the neighborhood got rough really bad, quickly. Yeah. And whenever the house was empty, it would get broken into and they'd spray graffiti all over the walls. And so as a kid, I used to have to go on the weekends and we'd have to paint that house. I bet I painted that house 4 times, on the interiors because they would damage. They finally sold it, but it really put them behind the 8 ball financially for a very long time, the loss of that house. And from what they say, it was such a nice neighborhood. They had grown up on that street, both my mom and dad, and my grandparents had lived there for a number of years, but I never knew it as a nice neighborhood. I think we were out of there by the time I was 3 or 4 because of it had turned so quickly. Yeah.
And while you all were enjoying the comforts of home and all wrapped up in yourselves around the television, enter the National Guard for me.
Yeah.
And I had never seen anything like that. And that's
that's
when it got real. Even for me at, what was I, 15 years old? When I saw the National Guard, then they put a curfew. So you had to be off the streets, man. They were not playing. Yeah. And they had the rifles with bayonets on it, man. I'd never seen that, And so it was a real scary time for a kid like me. And like I say, the stuff that I had taken, I wasn't allowed to keep. I kept nothing. But it was just a big mess, big chaos. People were running everywhere and just crazy, man. And finally, that's what shut it down. National Guard came in and, we were, had to stay in the house and couldn't go anywhere. And that's the last I remember of it, outside of the aftermath when it was over.
Now, how did that event and seeing those things, what kind of impression did that make on you? Both the craziness and the authority that came in to do that. And how did that affect you beyond that event?
Yeah, at the time, the frenzy, getting caught up in the frenzy of it all was kind of an adrenaline rush for me. Mm-hmm. But afterwards, man, I realized that they had burned down everything within our neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So we had to go clear across into Gardena somewhere to get food and stand in lines and all that kind of stuff. And I shook my head and I'm saying, there's got to be a better way than this, than to burn the entire city down. That's got to be crazy, And so I vowed that I'd never. And remember, there's been several riots and uprisings, whatever you want to call them.
I was going to say, it repeated itself years later.
Right. And of course, I had nothing to do with that stuff.
Neither did I.
There was a guy running with a TV or something that got caught on TV, and people are saying that it looked like me, but it wasn't me. Yeah. But no, what a good question, man. It was impressive to me. And now that I'm thinking about you on a serious note, it frightened me to know that things could get out of hand so quickly and how easily I could have been killed out there, man. I'm in there trying on shoes and all of a sudden the place catches on fire. Like, whoosh, Yeah. And I realized later on in life there's all kind of different people in a frenzy with all different types of agendas. Yep. And some are just caught up in the madness and others are there to strategically try to steal stuff. Then there's others that come in to destroy. Yeah. And I learned not to be any of those guys.
Yeah. Well, I did. I mean, years later, you did the story at the Watch Riots.
Yes.
I took a friend over there several years ago, and I said, "Oh, you never been to Watts Towers? Let's go see." After you had done that story,
right?
And we drove in there, and I was like, "Holy smokes! This place has never recovered from that. It's a scary place. Yeah. Still, I mean, areas within there.
Yep.
And you can see that it really just it never recovered.
No. But that little spot right there where you were,
yes,
where
when you actually get to the towers,
that's a safe zone.
Yes,
that place was never touched during the riots.
That's true.
And remember, it was an Italian immigrant that built that. Yep. It wasn't a black person or anything like that. But for some reason, that became sacred ground and still is.
Yes,
as long as you're on that little stretch of land, you're pretty safe.
Yeah.
So it's a great time, man. We could go on forever, man.
I know. That's what we tend to do.
I know. Well, we don't want to bore anybody, but I hope people are, understand and
hopefully this gives a little taste of who we are and kind of our friendship and where we come from. I'm really looking forward to getting some other folks in here so that we can hear their stories and hear them share what they saw when they were there, get their perspective. Again, it doesn't have to be major historical events. It could be just little things that have turned out to blossom and become something significant and has affected us. So I can't wait to and we're also having fun here. So that's
absolutely having a good time with it as well. So we hope you enjoyed this broadcast. We can't wait to do the next one.
Podcast.
Oh, what did I say? Broadcast. What's the difference between a broadcast and a podcast?
I'm still trying to figure that out.
So is a pod more?
I think a pod, you have to go find it. And a broad, you put it out there over the airwaves. I don't know.
Dude, that was pretty deep, man. You just made that up right now, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, you're good, man. It's like some of the assignments you gave me back in the day. You just made them up.
That's how we roll, right?
But we hope folks will tune in, and we hope you enjoyed this program, and we're looking forward to seeing you on our next one. I'm just excited. So we got a lot of stuff coming up. So
yep. Can't
stay
wait.
tuned.
I appreciate everyone for being patient. This is new to us. I've never done this before.
Right.
I know you've done shows. I'm usually behind the camera, behind the microphone kind of a guy, so this is all new for me. So
did well, man.
I'll try not to step on your toes too much.
Yeah, stay off my toes, brother.
I'm off them.
Then again, you walk on the tops, I'll walk on the bottoms. No problem. All right, folks, we hope to see you next time on I Was There. I'm Ron Roberson.
I'm Jeff Trujillo.
We'll see you next time.